For I came down from heaven, not to do my will, but the will of the one who sent me.
E vedo con piacere che fate tesoro di queste testimonianze del passato per rinnovare la vostra disponibilità alla missione oggi, nelle forme che il Concilio Vaticano II.
Before his death, Pope Francis left behind more than memories. He left a hidden letter. Addressed to Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, this long-lost message has finally been revealed, sparking global speculation. Was it a personal goodbye, or a quiet signal about the future of the Church? Inside, Francis shared heartfelt guidance, and perhaps a hint at who should lead next. What did the Pope truly see in Tagle? And how could this letter reshape the Catholic Church forever? Stay with us, because this changes everything.
In breaking news, the Vatican has confirmed Pope Francis has died. Just hours after an appearance during the holiest weekend of the Christian calendar, the Catholic world is in mourning. He had been in critical condition due to double pneumonia and a lung infection. For the latest on this breaking news, head to 7news.com.au.
A lost letter found after Pope Francis's death. When Pope Francis passed away, the world mourned a leader known for his humility, compassion, and quiet strength. But no one expected what came next. Hidden deep within the Vatican archives, a letter surfaced, a letter written by Pope Francis himself. And not just any letter. This one was addressed to a man many believe could shape the future of the Catholic Church, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. For years, rumors swirled about a private message from the Pope to Tagle. Some said it was lost. Others believed it never existed. But now, the truth is out. The letter was personal, handwritten, and filled with guidance, a Vatican insider revealed. So why was it hidden? And why reveal it now, after Francis is gone? The answer might be simple: timing. Pope Francis was known for thinking ahead, always planning for the Church's future. Many believe he intended this letter to appear exactly when it did, when the Church needed direction the most. But what's actually inside this mysterious letter? It's not a formal decree. It's not an official appointment. It's something far more powerful, a reflection of trust, mentorship, and vision. I entrust you to carry forward the spirit of service, Pope Francis wrote, according to early reports. A message like that doesn't just land quietly. It sends shockwaves through the Vatican. Because this wasn't just a friendly note. It was a clear sign that Pope Francis saw Tagle as more than a colleague. He saw him as the future. But how did Tagle, a humble man from Manila, become so important to the Pope? Let's rewind and look at the bond that made this letter possible. A relationship built on trust. How Tagle became Francis's protégé.
If he's strong enough, you hear the cheers, it's a good sign. Someone is about to appear at that balcony. He has, of course, been very poorly. He spent 5 weeks in hospital, but here he is.
Luis Antonio Tagle didn't come from power or privilege. He came from the streets of Manila, where faith was lived every day, not in grand cathedrals, but in small acts of kindness. That's exactly what caught Pope Francis's eye. Both men shared the same roots: humble beginnings, a heart for the poor, and a vision of a church that walks with its people, not above them. When Francis first met Tagle, it wasn't long before a deep respect formed. The Pope saw something familiar in Tagle, a leader who wasn't chasing titles, but chasing purpose. He leads with his heart, not his rank, Francis once said about Tagle. Over the years, that trust only grew stronger. In 2019, Pope Francis appointed Tagle to oversee one of the Vatican's most important departments, the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. It was more than a promotion. It was a clear message to the world. Francis didn't surround himself with politicians. He chose pastors, leaders who believed in compassion over control. Tagle became a regular face by the Pope's side during key events, global missions, and sensitive church matters. He listens before he speaks. That's rare here, a fellow cardinal commented. It wasn't long before whispers began. Was Francis preparing Tagle for something bigger? The answer may have been sitting in that lost letter all along. But what exactly did Pope Francis say in his message? What lessons, what visions did he leave for Tagle to carry forward? Let's take a closer look inside the letter, because its words are now shaping conversations across the globe. Pope Francis's teachings and vision for Tagle. The moment the letter was opened, those present knew. It wasn't just personal. It was historic. Written in Pope Francis's familiar handwriting, the letter wasn't filled with instructions or commands. It was filled with something far more powerful: wisdom. The Church does not belong to those who seek power. It belongs to those who serve, Francis wrote. In those simple words, the Pope laid out his vision, not just for Tagle, but for the future of Catholic leadership. He spoke of humility, compassion, and the need for a church that listens more than it speaks. A church that embraces change without forgetting its roots. But there was one line that truly stood out. Luis, you understand the hearts of the people. Never lose that. The future needs leaders who carry mercy in both hands. It wasn't a direct order. It wasn't naming Tagle as the next pope. But it was clear. Francis saw Tagle as someone meant to guide the Church through uncertain times. The letter touched on global challenges too: poverty, migration, environmental care, issues that both Francis and Tagle championed throughout their ministries. And at the end, a quiet blessing. May you walk forward not with fear, but with faith. For many, this letter confirms what they've long suspected, that Pope Francis wasn't just mentoring Tagle, he was preparing him. Now, as the world reads between the lines, one question remains: was this letter a private message or a public prophecy? Next, we explore the phrase that sparked global speculation: he has my spirit. Stay with us.
The victims of discrimination, violence, abuse, exploitation, and human trafficking. The Filipino migrant workers and their families. The survivors of natural calamities and armed conflicts. The non-Christian Catholics. The followers of non-Christian religions. The promoters of peace, especially in our beloved Mindanao, and the whole of creation that groans. All of us want to say again and again, maraming salamat po, Santo Padre. You often end your meetings and encounters by saying, Vi chiedo di pregare per me.
You carry my spirit, the words that sparked global speculation. For years, Pope Francis spoke carefully. Every word was measured, every phrase carried meaning. But there was one moment, one sentence, that has echoed louder than any sermon. Tagle carries my spirit. At first, many thought it was just a compliment, a kind remark from a pope to a trusted cardinal. But after the discovery of the lost letter, those words now sound very different. Because when a pope says something like that, it's never just words. Pope Francis and Cardinal Tagle shared more than meetings and missions. They shared a vision of a church that serves, listens, and embraces the modern world without fear. In Tagle, I see a heart that understands both God's people and God's purpose, Francis once told a close advisor. It wasn't the only time he hinted at something deeper. Observers noticed that Francis often placed Tagle in key roles, quietly giving him more influence behind the scenes. Whether it was leading humanitarian efforts, addressing social justice, or representing the Vatican on global platforms, Tagle was always there. And now, with the letter revealed, many believe that Francis was sending subtle signals all along. Was he pointing to Tagle as his spiritual successor? Not through official declarations, but through trust, mentorship, and moments like this? The Church doesn't run on politics alone. It runs on legacy. And Pope Francis may have been shaping that legacy with every quiet word. But if this was truly a spiritual endorsement, what exactly was Francis asking of Tagle? Let's explore the hidden message behind the letter and why experts believe it could reshape the Church's future. The hidden message. Was this letter a spiritual endorsement? Tagle's reaction. Humility in the face of immense responsibility. When Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle received the letter, he didn't call a press conference. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't even hint at its contents. Instead, he did what he always does. He stayed humble. "I am just a servant of God," Tagle reportedly told a close friend when asked about the letter. There were no grand gestures, no ambition, just quiet reflection. That's what sets Tagle apart, and perhaps why Pope Francis trusted him so deeply. While others might see such a letter as a ticket to power, Tagle saw it as a reminder of responsibility. Leadership is not about titles. It's about carrying the weight of others, Tagle once said in a homily. Sources say Tagle spent days in prayer after reading the letter, seeking guidance, not glory. His reaction was exactly what Francis would have hoped for: calm, thoughtful, and grounded in faith. Even as speculation grew around him, Tagle continued his work, focusing on humanitarian efforts, interfaith dialogue, and supporting communities in need. The Church must always be with the people, especially in times of struggle, he reminded his congregation. For Tagle, the letter wasn't about personal destiny. It was about continuing a mission he and Pope Francis both believed in. But while Tagle remains humble, the world is watching closely. Because this isn't just about one man's reaction. It's about a church standing at a crossroads. And with Francis gone, this letter could mark the beginning of a new era, if Tagle chooses to step forward when called. Next, we explore why this letter couldn't have come at a more critical time, for both Tagle and the global Church. A church at a crossroads. Why this letter matters now more than ever. The Catholic Church has faced many turning points in its 2,000-year history. But today, it's standing at one of its most critical crossroads: scandals, declining membership in Western countries, growing calls for reform, and a world that's rapidly changing. These are just a few of the challenges shaking the Church's foundations. And in the middle of this storm, Pope Francis's lost letter to Cardinal Tagle appears, like a lighthouse guiding the way. So why does this letter matter so much right now? Because it's more than words on paper. It's a symbol of what the Church could become. The Church must not fear change when it serves love and truth, Pope Francis once said. Francis spent his papacy pushing for a church that was less about walls and more about bridges. He reached out to the marginalized, spoke openly about the environment, embraced interfaith dialogue, and reminded leaders that humility is stronger than hierarchy. But he knew his time was limited. That's why many believe this letter wasn't just personal advice to Tagle. It was a blueprint for how to navigate the future. The Church is being pulled in two directions. On one side, traditionalists fear losing centuries of customs. On the other, progressives argue that without change, the Church risks becoming irrelevant. Francis understood this tension better than anyone, and he knew that after him, someone would need to carry that delicate balance forward. Enter Cardinal Tagle, a man who embodies both tradition and progress, a man who grew up in a deeply Catholic country but understands the struggles of the modern world, a man who doesn't lead from above but walks beside his people. Luis knows how to listen, Francis once told a fellow cardinal, and today's Church must be a listening church. As regions like Africa and Asia see Catholicism grow, while Europe and North America face spiritual decline, the need for a global, compassionate leader becomes clearer. This is why the letter's timing couldn't be more perfect or more urgent. The Church needs direction. It needs healing. It needs a leader who understands that faith isn't just preserved in ancient texts, but lived out in the streets, in the struggles of ordinary people. And Pope Francis believed Tagle could be that leader. But not everyone agrees, because with every call for change, there's resistance. And that's exactly what we'll explore next: how this letter has sparked both hope and fear within the walls of the Vatican. Support and resistance. The Vatican divided over Tagle's rise. The moment news of Pope Francis's letter to Cardinal Tagle spread through Vatican corridors, it didn't just inspire whispers of hope, it ignited a quiet storm. Because while many see Tagle as a symbol of compassion and progress, others see something far more unsettling: change. And if there's one thing parts of the Vatican fear, it's too much change, too fast. Tagle represents a different future, said a senior Vatican analyst. And not everyone is ready for that. Let's be clear, Tagle has plenty of supporters. Progressive cardinals, younger clergy, and millions of Catholics across Asia, Africa, and Latin America view him as the natural continuation of Pope Francis's vision. A leader who understands modern challenges but stays rooted in faith. He speaks to the people. He understands suffering. That's the kind of leadership we need now, said a bishop from Kenya. But behind closed doors, conservative factions within the Church are uneasy. To them, Tagle's openness, his focus on inclusion, interfaith dialogue, and addressing social issues like climate change and migration, feels like a step away from tradition. Some fear that his rise could lead to reforms they've spent years resisting. We must protect the timeless truths of the Church, an anonymous Vatican source stated, not chase the winds of modern society. This division isn't new. Pope Francis himself faced similar criticism throughout his papacy. But with Francis gone, the debate over the Church's future has only intensified. The letter, while not officially naming Tagle as successor, has emboldened his supporters and alarmed his critics. It sparked private meetings, strategic alliances, and, according to insiders, early discussions about the next conclave. Some cardinals are rallying around more traditional candidates, hoping to steer the Church back toward conservative values. Others quietly believe that following Francis's path, and perhaps Tagle, is the only way forward. But Tagle? He remains silent. As always, he lets his actions speak louder than politics. "I serve where I'm called," Tagle once said when asked about his future. For now, the Church stands divided, caught between those clinging to the past and those reaching for a more inclusive tomorrow. And at the center of it all is a letter. A simple piece of paper that carries the weight of 1 billion hopes and fears. What happens next could redefine the Catholic Church for generations. But one thing is certain: Tagle's name isn't going away. Up next, we explore what his leadership could mean for millions around the world. If he truly steps into the role many believe Pope Francis quietly prepared him for. Stay tuned. What Tagle's leadership could mean for millions. If Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle steps into greater leadership, whether officially as Pope or as the guiding force behind church reforms, the impact won't just be felt within the Vatican walls. It will ripple across the globe. Why? Because Tagle isn't just a church leader. He's a voice for the people. Faith must live where people live, in their struggles, in their hopes, Tagle once said. So, what would a church shaped by Tagle look like? First, it would be